What I think is interesting about our society is that what makes communities and places tick is not government legislation. Of course, it all helps. And it's not edicts, and it's not top-down stuff. It's the energy, human energy, bottom up from communities, from people, and community organisations. And what makes interesting places, I think, is the imagination. It's that. So the moment you get people in a room chucking ideas around, that's when life gets really interesting, and projects and places and communities get really interesting. And that's what this is. It's a talking shop. I listened to a great thing the other day. It was on the Alistair Campbell podcast with Rory Stewart. Now, this is a weird thing, right? So rhetoric was a subject that used to be taught in the ancient world, and it was taught until the 19th century, when people got a bit suspicious of rhetoric, because rhetoric was all about learning how to speak. It was learning how to express ideas, and people thought it was actually just about selling stuff, but it isn't. It's about communication and enthusing people, So they were saying, if only we had some rhetoric around these days. Not politicians, not rhetoric in Parliament, but, in other words, giving everybody the chance to be able to stand up and speak their mind and express an idea and an enthusiasm for something. And that, I think, is incredibly precious. And we've lost it in amongst all the online twit stuff, Face-to-face, we don't use emojis as people, and face-to-face is really powerful, and it's where an idea becomes a reality. I don't think great ideas can happen in isolation. Nothing of meaning can happen in isolation, actually. And the connection with people, whether it's in a community, whether it's over a pint, whether it's, drinking, singing, eating, dancing. Those events those are the meaningful things in life. They're the things that we remember. I mean, nobody remembers the blinking email they sent 5 years ago, but you remember the party you went to. You remember that encounter with that really exciting individual who inspired you. So in my ideal world, and this applies to Leeds, as it obviously applies to many places. I'm not picking on Leeds at all, but I think the idea of a more sustainable places along the lines of, say, Freiburg in Germany, which has got an integrated transport system. It's got a really strong green policy, lots of social housing, lots of affordability, and there's a degree of equanimity here. We're talking about a world which is slightly more working to try to be fairer. Yeah, I mean, the big picture for me is making places greener. But if you take One Planet Living as a starting point, as a philosophy, and I like to, because it's quite simple to understand, it includes heritage and culture. And so you don't make a green city by knocking everything down and building loads of green buildings. You don't express the future simply in sheets of glass and bling, exciting, wet look, attractive baubles in our built environment. What makes a difference in cities, as in open countryside, as in villages, is the layering of everything. So the sustainable place is the place that makes sense, where people feel, I feel at home here, because this is unlike anywhere else in the world. There are things in Leeds, there are buildings, there are slightly neglected industrial buildings that waiting for a rebirth. There are warehouses, there are dock buildings, there are all kinds of things, by the river, up on the hill, and they all deserve polishing up, actually. And I think we're very selective in the way we look at history. We look at the 18th and 19th century and think, that's something to list and keep and polish up. And we don't look at the 20th century in the same way, whereas I think we should. There are many great industrial buildings of our recent heritage and past that mean something to people and will continue to mean more, actually, to future generations. So I'm all for conserving pretty well everything we can. And I think, if you can knock it down, you have to stop and think, no, is there any possibility of using this structure, this old road, this way, this path, this tree, this factory in another way? Can we convert that concrete car park into housing? The great thing about going to the great cities of the world is that they are memorable for their personalities. They're, not memorable for their new glass buildings. So it doesn't matter how you build, what matters is behaviour. It's how we venerate the environment, our world, our planet, how we respect it and use it, how much care we express for it. And we can do that with our thermostats, our pullovers, our insulation. We can do it with, we can do it by buying eco-friendly washing up liquid and toilet paper. But actually, where it really, really starts to make a difference is not inside buildings, it's outside, it's in the spaces in between. And that's it's where communities come to learn to be resilient, to depend on each other, to share stuff, and whether it's a car club or bicycle club or an allotment or fruit or cooking or, experiences. And I think we also have a habit in the UK, we have a culture now, which is probably 30 years old, 40 years old, of major developer landowners taking public realm and making it private realm. So you go to Liverpool 1, you're walking down the street, you think that's public realm. It's not. It's owned by a company. At Covent Garden, I was filming in Covent Garden a couple of years ago, and a security guard comes up and says, "You can't film here." I said, "Well, why not? We're on the pavement." He said, "No, it's private land." He said, "If you step 1 yard that way, across the cobbles, there was no demarcation." He said, "You'd be fine." The moment you know that suddenly all of this supposedly public realm is not for you, but it's been controlled and policed and filmed and protected, then you start to feel differently about your engagement with it and how you feel you can use it. I think being able, through things like community land trusts and the gifting of land to residents collectively, not as in this is yours, you're going to own it forever, but it sort of goes with the title of where you live, so it goes with the house or the flat. I think that's an incredibly civilized thing to do, because you're suddenly, instead of us all living in small houses, we live in the smallest houses in Europe pretty well. Suddenly your sense of ownership increases and expands, and you feel an owner of something bigger. Yeah, it's important to recognise that on the one hand we have, should we call them the baddies, and on the other there are some goodies, and there are great people working in housing, in local authorities, in community organisations, connecting people, and there are plenty of those in Leeds. And there are some amazing housing associations and social landlords who are really pioneering and progressive, and they're important to seek out.
They're the goodies.
They're the goodies.